Hello and welcome to another episode of Wicked Parley. Tonight we're going to be discussing something that is very important to me, and that is there something called being too picky? Particularly, are women too picky when it comes to dating? Now, I've discussed dating over the last year or so, and that's gotten no attention, no traction. You guys don't care. At least that's what it appears like. But I don't care that you guys don't care because it's important to me, and so I'm talking about it. Now, if you were to come up to a random guy and go, hey, what are your requirements for a woman? You would be very, very hard pressed to find a list more than maybe 5 or 6. And in fact, most guys are even similar than that. They might only have like 3 or 4 things on that list. Things like, is she hot? Is she smart? Can she cook? Does she want children or not want children, depending on the type of guy? That's about it. Maybe, does she clean up after you? For some guys. I personally like to hear my own shit. But other people, I understand. But women, my God. Some women have an insanely long list of things. Other women just simply aren't even interested in men, period, for a variety of reasons. I tend to think that that's probably true, more so than I think a lot of people realize. You see, in the past, women were kind of forced to be with men because they were their protectors. They were part of society. They were the norms. You pick a reason, and you can pretty much find something that supports some element of that. Now, whether or not that's 100% true, I'm not going to even begin to argue these points because, well, frankly, for as many as you find for, you'll find equally as many against. And so that's not really the point. But the point is this. Why is it that it's okay for some people to be so selective when it comes to dating and why some are not? So one of the main things that needs to be understood is the fact that there's some statistics that were collected and shared with much of the world, and a particular individual by the name of Aaron Clarney wrote a book called The Book of Numbers, which essentially points a bunch of interesting statistical data that points to some interesting trends when it comes to dating. The thing that I think is important to take away when it comes to some of the math that is presented here is the fact that roughly 50% of all children being born today are born to single parents. They're born in single parent homes, and this has an adverse effect on the development of those children. They're going to have a completely skewed look on life that probably isn't going to bode well. But enough about talking about those particular things. I'd like specifically to talk about why might it be okay for certain things to be picky. Now, when you look at the overall number of people who have passed along their genetics, roughly 90% of all women who have ever lived have been able to pass along their genetics, and roughly 5% of all men have passed along their genetics. Now, you can point towards wars, you can point towards disease, you could say that because there were harems, that all of these things indicate that the reasons why men were denied the ability to pass along the genetics. But we know that that today doesn't really hold up. If that was the case, then why is it that we could say roughly 50% of all men have had an equal opportunity to procreate in the last 100 years? So why are these statistics still holding true? Well, it has a lot to do with who's doing the picking. Now, men are only going to look at things from a somewhat limited perspective. Now, I'm not going to say 100% of all guys will operate this way because that's just simply not true. The truth is that most guys look for beauty and they look for good health. And traditionally, if you're beautiful and you have good health, then you likely have good genes. And so guys are attracted to these particular things. These things are also found typically only in the young. And typically guys are going to want to try and have kids. We're biologically programmed. Hey, we need to procreate, we need to procreate. And the way in which this happens is you look for women who can. Well, who can? It's a pretty narrow window. Somewhere between 20 years old and about 25 is peak beauty. Women after about 26, 27 start having, difficulties when it comes to having children. And so if you want to have a large family, then you're kind of out of luck unless you start having lots of twins if you get into the late 20s, early 30s. And after that kind of window, that's kind of it. It's over, folks, for the most part, unless you utilize some pretty expensive procedures. So that might have a lot to do with the reason why men find this particular demographic beautiful and why they pursue them and why that they are sort of picky towards women who fall in that specific category. But they also look for certain things that are indicators of being a good mother, and that has to do with the whole taking care of things and having a certain level of femininity. involved with their character. But outside of those particular things, I don't hear very often that guys that are interested in women, and Miss Beck, I'm sure that's very clear too, have too much more added on that list. While women, however, have upwards of 100 possible requirements. Is it right? Is it fair for that to be the case? I'm not sure it is. In fact, I actually think that it's ridiculous. I think that if you were to think about things in a sexual marketplace, I think women have priced themselves out of the market. And I think that that's kind of a problem. I've talked a lot about why this is bad. Maybe I've said some things that are considered some inflammatory. But I'd like to talk about some things that could be more constructive. I'd like to discuss what we can do about the particular circumstance of the pickiness that's involved in dating. Now, one of the things that I think for men to be able to consider is start doing something that's interesting. You know, get off the couch, stop playing so much video games, maybe spend a little more time in the gym, go find a hobby or do something interesting. So that way, when you do have that first awkward date, you'll have something interesting to say, which might spark something. And women, you know, that list of 100 things or more that could be on there, maybe you look at it and be a little more objective. Understand that you're not a perfect 100% person that has no flaws and you're like this goddess. You're not a 10 out of 10 knockout. Most women are pretty average. And so you should expect for a pretty average guy. You know, stop trying to shoot for Chad Thunderstruck, you know? Stop looking for, you know, the crazy people out there that are like super, like everything that you could possibly want. Truth is, most of those things aren't even real anyways. Stop having kids with people who are drug dealers. Stop picking people who are users and abusers and just leaving because they look the right way or say the right thing for a little while. You know, if you're going to be picky and choosy, then be picky and choosy for the right reasons. Find people who are good, acceptable people and vet them properly. Don't just rush into things. That's what I think everyone needs to do in the first place. Take a moment to get to know your fellow man, fellow woman, and do it in a way that is respectful to both people. There used to be this thing called courting, and I feel like we've really gone away from that over the years. And it's because it became expensive and had all this craziness that was involved in it. But at the end of the day, if you respect one another and you get to know one another, then great. And for the younger generation out there who may watch this video, you know, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that you guys have started to take that actual action in the first place. And so I'd just like to say, congratulations, you guys are doing the right path. Some of us, other people who are still out there looking, maybe we need to take that advice. Maybe we need to look in that particular direction. Because only if we take the steps that are necessary to actually change things in a way that is helpful and we're less picky, less choosy, then we may have a good chance at finding happiness rather than living the rest of our lives alone surrounded by pets. Because while pets are wonderful, they aren't going to console you when things go real bad. I'd like to thank you guys all for participating in tonight's episode. If you liked what you saw, then please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you either like or disagree with some of the things that we've said, then please let us know in the comment section below. For the rest of you guys, I hope you guys have a great evening. And if you guys have any dating issues out there, just remember, it may not be you, it might be her. She might be too picky. See you in the next one.